I am Oliver Sterling, 32 years old, and my own mother just sat there while her husband and his son tried to steal the roof over my head. Before I tell you how a single piece of paper made the most powerful man I know shake with fear, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you can just smell the money? Not the kind you earn from working a double shift at the mill or saving up for a used Ford. I'm talking about old money, or at least money that wants you to think it's old. That was the smell in the courtroom that Tuesday morning. It smelled like expensive cologne, leather briefcases, and the kind of arrogance that only comes when you've never been told no in your entire life. I was sitting at the defendant's table, alone. My hands were resting on the cheap wood, and I was trying to keep them from shaking. Not because I was scared. I was past scared. I was shaking because I was angry, and because I knew something they didn't. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. They didn't just open. They were pushed with a sense of entitlement that made everyone turn their heads. In walked Julian Vance, my stepbrother. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. He had that smirk on his face, the one he's had since we were kids. He walked like he owned the place, like the judge was just another employee on his payroll. He was twirling a set of keys on his finger. I recognized the fob. It was for the new Lamborghini Huracan he'd bought last week. Lime green. Subtlety was never Julian's strong suit. Behind him came my mother, Evelyn, and my stepfather, Richard Vance. Richard was a big man, not in a healthy way, but in a way that took up space. He wore power like a second skin. He didn't look at me. He never looked at me if he could help it. He was busy adjusting his cufflinks, looking bored, like this court hearing was just an inconvenience in his schedule of buying up half the county. And my mother, she looked beautiful as always, perfectly coiffed hair, a dress that screamed country club lunch, and clutching her Hermes bag like a shield. She glanced at me for a second, just a flicker, and then looked away. That hurt more than Richard's indifference. It was a look of pity, or maybe shame. I couldn't tell anymore. They took their seats at the plaintiff's table. Their lawyer, Leonard Baxter, was already there, arranging his papers with the precision of a surgeon preparing to amputate a limb. Baxter was known around town as the Vance family bulldog. He didn't lose, or at least he hadn't lost yet. The bailiff called out, "All rise." Judge Harrison Cole entered. He was a stern man, known for being tough but fair. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the two tables. On one side, the Vances looking like a royal family portrait. On the other side, me, Oliver Sterling, in a suit I'd bought off the rack 5 years ago for a friend's wedding. "This is the matter of the estate of Arthur Sterling," Judge Cole said. His voice echoed in the silent room. "Motion for emergency transfer of assets, specifically the property known as Sterling Castle, filed by Mr. Richard Vance on behalf of the family." Baxter stood up. He didn't even need notes. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth as oil, "we are here today to correct a grievous error. My clients, Mr. Richard Vance and Mrs. Evelyn Vance, along with their son Julian, are the rightful caretakers of the Sterling legacy. Mr. Oliver Sterling, unfortunately, has demonstrated a complete lack of capacity to manage such a significant historical property." I clenched my jaw. Lack of capacity. That was their angle. Baxter continued, pacing slightly. "The castle requires significant financial upkeep. It requires vision. Mr. Vance has built a real estate empire. Mr. Julian Vance runs a successful media company. Oliver here." He gestured to me with a dismissive wave of his hand. "He is an architect, yes, but he has no assets, no experience in management, and quite frankly, Your Honor, we have concerns about his stability since the passing of his grandfather." Richard nodded solemnly. My mother dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. It was a performance. A perfect, rehearsed performance. "We have witness statements," Baxter said, tapping a thick folder. "Affidavits from staff, from neighbors. They all say the same thing. Oliver is overwhelmed. He is neglecting the property. For the good of the estate, and to honor the late Arthur Sterling, ownership must be transferred to Mr. Richard Vance. Effective immediately." He slid the motion across the bench toward the judge. Judge Cole picked up the papers and skimmed them. The silence in the room was heavy. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear Julian tapping his pen on the table. A rhythmic, annoying sound. The judge looked up. He looked directly at me. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "you are representing yourself today?" I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to stand straight. "Yes, Your Honor." "You have heard the motion," Judge Cole said. "Mr. Baxter presents a compelling argument regarding the financial stability required to maintain Sterling Castle. Do you have a response? Do you object to this transfer?" I looked at Richard. He was checking his watch. He thought this was over. He thought he'd won. He'd spent 20 years trying to erase my father's name, trying to erase me, and now he was about to take the last thing my grandfather left me. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her hands. I took a deep breath. I thought about my grandfather, Arthur. I thought about the nights we spent in the library, him showing me the blueprints of the castle, teaching me every secret passage, every hidden room. He knew this day would come. He had warned me. "Oliver," he had said, holding my hand tightly in his final days, "they will come for it. They will come for everything. But I have built a wall they cannot climb." I looked back at the judge. "I object, Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. Baxter rolled his eyes. Richard sighed loudly, making sure the whole room heard his impatience. "On what grounds?" Judge Cole asked. "Do you have evidence to refute these claims? Do you have financial records? Character witnesses?" "I have something better," I said. Baxter chuckled. "Unless you have a winning lottery ticket in your pocket, son, I suggest you sit down and let the adults handle this." I ignored him. I looked at the clock. 10 a.m. Exactly. "I would like to ask the court to wait," I said. "Wait." Judge Cole frowned. "For what, Mr. Sterling?" "For the last person," I said. "He should be here right now." Richard leaned forward, whispering something to Baxter. Baxter stood up again. "Your Honor, this is a stalling tactic. Mr. Sterling is wasting the court's time. There is no one else. We are the family. We are the only ones who matter." "Just 1 minute, Your Honor," I said. "Please." Judge Cole looked at me, then at the clock. He seemed to weigh the request. He was a man who respected procedure, but he also had an instinct for when things weren't quite right. "I will give you 1 minute," Judge Cole said. The seconds ticked by. Julian let out a loud groan and slumped in his chair. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I have a lunch reservation at noon." 30 seconds. Richard turned to look at me, a sneer curling his lip. "Give it up, Oliver. It's over. Go back to your little apartment and let us fix the mess you've made." 45 seconds. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Had something gone wrong? Had he been delayed? Had Richard gotten to him? 50 seconds. Baxter stood up. "Your Honor, surely this is enough." Bam. The courtroom doors didn't swing open this time. They were opened firmly with authority. A man stepped inside. He was tall, wearing a black suit that was tailored to perfection. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen 100 boardrooms and won battles in every single one of them. He had silver hair, neatly combed back, and eyes that scanned the room like a hawk spotting prey. Elias Thorne. The room went silent. Even Julian stopped tapping his pen. There was an energy around Elias, a gravity that pulled everyone's attention. He didn't look at Richard. He didn't look at my mother. He walked straight down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. He walked past the bar and stopped right next to me. He nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. "Your Honor," Elias said. His voice was deep, resonant. "My apologies for the delay. Traffic on the bridge." Judge Cole looked over his glasses. "And you are?" "I am Elias Thorne," he said. "I am the senior executor for the Hawthorne Trust." Richard's head snapped up. I saw the color drain from his face. Hawthorne Trust. Even Richard Vance knew who they were. They handled the kind of money that didn't advertise. The kind of money that controlled governments. Hawthorne Trust. Baxter sputtered. What does that have to do with this case? We are discussing the probate of Arthur Sterling's estate. Elias ignored him. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. He pulled out a single, thick envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Your Honor, Elias said. Mr. Baxter is operating under a misunderstanding. He believes Sterling Castle is part of the probate estate. It is not. He walked up to the bench and handed the envelope to the judge. This is the deed of trust, Elias said, established 7 years ago by the late Arthur Sterling. It places the castle, the grounds, and all associated assets into an irrevocable trust. Irrevocable, Baxter said, his voice rising an octave. That's impossible. We have the will. The will says, the will covers personal effects. Elias cut him off smoothly. The castle is not a personal effect. It is a legacy, and it is no longer owned by Arthur Sterling. It is owned by the trust. Judge Cole broke the wax seal. He pulled out the documents and began to read. His eyes widened. He turned the page. Then another. He looked up at Elias, then at Richard, and finally at me. This document, Judge Cole whispered. He leaned into his microphone. This document states that the sole beneficiary of the trust, with full rights of residency and management, is Oliver Sterling. Richard stood up, knocking his chair back. That's a lie. Arthur was senile. He didn't know what he was doing. That document is a forgery. Mr. Vance, sit down. Judge Cole barked. I will not sit down, Richard shouted. His face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. I have put millions into this family. That castle is mine. It's compensation for everything I've done. The trust is ironclad, Elias said calmly, addressing the judge. It also contains a specific clause regarding guardianship. In the event that Oliver Sterling is incapacitated, control does not revert to family members. It reverts to the Hawthorne Trust acting as fiduciary. Judge Cole looked at Richard. That means, Mr. Vance, even if you proved Mr. Sterling here was unfit, you would never get your hands on that property. Not in a million years. Judge Cole looked back at the document. He paused, his finger tracing a line near the bottom. That can't be possible, he whispered. What? Baxter asked. What is it? Judge Cole looked up, and for the first time he looked truly shocked. There is an addendum here, the judge said slowly. It states that the trust also holds the deed to the Vance family residence at 42 Oakwood Drive. The room erupted. What? Richard screamed. That's my house. I bought that house. According to this, Judge Cole said, you took a loan from Arthur Sterling 20 years ago to buy that land. A loan secured by the deed. You never paid it back. The interest compounded. 7 years ago, Arthur foreclosed on the loan quietly and transferred the deed to the trust. My mother let out a gasp. She grabbed Richard's arm. Richard? Is that true? Richard looked like he was having a stroke. He was opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. So, Judge Cole said, a small smile playing on his lips, not only does Mr. Oliver Sterling own the castle, it appears, Mr. Vance, that he is also your landlord. I looked at Richard. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shaking. He was. Motion denied, Judge Cole said, slamming his gavel. This court recognizes the authority of the Hawthorne Trust. Case dismissed. Julian looked at his father, his eyes wide with panic. Dad? What does that mean? Dad? Richard didn't answer. He was staring at Elias Thorne with pure hatred. But Elias wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me. This is just the beginning, Oliver, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Your grandfather prepared for everything. I didn't know it then, but he was right. I thought the battle was over. I thought I had won. But as I walked out of that courtroom, feeling the first rush of victory, I had no idea that I had just started a war. And the secrets buried in that castle were far darker than unpaid loans or property deeds. I walked past my family. My mother wouldn't look at me. Richard was on his phone, screaming at someone. Julian was running after him, asking about his car payments. I walked out into the sunlight. The air tasted different, tasted like freedom. But shadows have a way of stretching long before the sun goes down. When I was 12 years old, I learned that a house is not always a home. Sometimes, it's just a building where people who share your last name pretend to tolerate you. I remember the day my mother married Richard. It was a lavish affair in the castle gardens. Tents white as clouds, champagne flowing like water, and enough flowers to bury a small town. I was the ring bearer. I stood there in a tuxedo that scratched my neck, holding a velvet pillow, watching my mother say, "I do," to a man who had never spoken more than 5 words to me. Those 5 words were, "Stay out of my way." Before Richard, it was just Mom, Grandpa Arthur, and me. My dad died when I was barely a year old. A car accident, they said. He lost control on a winding road during a storm. I don't remember him, but I grew up seeing his face in the hallways of Stirling Castle. He had kind eyes. Everyone said I looked just like him. Maybe that's why Richard hated me so much. Every time he looked at me, he saw the ghost of the man whose life he was trying to replace. After the wedding, things changed fast. Richard moved in, and he didn't come alone. He brought his noise, his business partners, and his son from a previous marriage, Julian. Julian was 8, 4 years younger than me, but he already knew how the world worked. He knew that crying got him toys, and lying got him out of trouble. Within a month, my bedroom in the main wing was needed for storage. I was moved to the guest house at the edge of the estate. It was a nice enough cottage, but the message was clear. You are not part of this family. You are a guest, and guests can be asked to leave. I remember one Christmas morning when I was 14. I woke up early, excited, and ran to the main house. The living room was filled with gifts, mountains of them. I saw a brand new dirt bike with a red bow. My heart leaped. I had been asking for one for months. I ran over to it, touching the cold metal of the handlebars. "Get your hands off that," a voice snapped. Richard was standing in the doorway, a cup of coffee in his hand. Julian was behind him, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "That's Julian's," Richard said. "But," I stammered. "He doesn't even know how to ride." "Then he'll learn," Richard said. He pointed to a small, wrapped box under the tree. "Yours is there." I opened it. It was a set of architectural drafting pencils. "Your grandfather said you like to draw," Richard said dismissively. "Useful skill. Maybe you can design Julian's garage someday." Julian laughed. He hopped on the bike and made vroom vroom noises. He looked at me and stuck out his tongue. That was my life. I was the spectator. They were the main event. But I had Grandpa Arthur. Arthur Sterling was a man of few words but deep actions. He saw what was happening. He saw the way Richard slowly took over the business meetings, the way he cut off old family friends, the way he isolated my mother. Arthur couldn't kick Richard out. My mother was blinded by love, or maybe by the security Richard provided. She was fragile. Losing my dad had broken something in her, and Richard was the glue holding the pieces together. Arthur didn't want to shatter her again, so he played a different game. "Come here, Oliver," he would say, beckoning me into his study late at night. The study was my sanctuary. It smelled of old paper, pipe tobacco, and oak. He would spread out the blueprints of the castle. "This place," he'd say, tracing the lines with a trembling finger, "is more than stones and mortar. It has a memory. It remembers who loves it and who just wants to sell it." He taught me everything. How the foundation was laid in 1920. Which walls were load-bearing. Where the hidden panel in the library was that led to the wine cellar. He taught me about the trust, about the responsibilities of wealth, about honor. "Richard is a shark," Arthur told me once. We were sitting on the terrace, watching Richard scream at a gardener for missing a weed. Sharks have to keep moving to breathe. They eat everything in their path. "But do you know what kills a shark, Oliver?" "No, Grandpa," I said. A net, he said. A net they can't see until they're already tangled in it. I didn't understand then what he meant. I thought he was just being metaphorical. 3 weeks ago, Arthur died. It was sudden, a stroke in his sleep. Or so the doctor said. The doctor Richard had hired. The funeral was a blur of black suits and fake tears. Richard gave the eulogy. He talked about partnership and legacy and moving forward. He didn't mention Arthur's kindness. He didn't mention me. I stood at the back, by the grave, watching the casket go down. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't my mother. It was Elias Thorne. I had seen him visit Arthur a few times over the years, but we had never spoken much. He loved you very much, Oliver, Elias said. I know, I choked out. He left you something, Elias said. He slipped a small brass key into my hand. Keep this safe. Don't tell anyone. Not your mother. Especially not Richard. What is it for? I asked. You'll know when the time is right, Elias said. Just remember, patience. The day after the funeral, Richard made his move. I came back from work. I was a junior architect at a firm in the city, to find the locks on the guest house changed. My clothes were in garbage bags on the front porch. What is this? I asked, banging on the front door of the main castle. Richard opened it. He was smiling. We're making some changes, Oliver. We need the guest house for staff. Julian is expanding his media team. You can't kick me out, I said. Grandpa said I could live here. Grandpa is dead, Richard said coldly. And the house belongs to the estate, which I control. You have 24 hours to move your truck and your trash off my property. Mom, I yelled. Mom. She appeared in the hallway behind him. She looked pale, tired. Mom. Tell him, I pleaded. She looked at Richard, then at me. Oliver. Maybe it's time you found your own place. You're 32. It's time to move on. Move on. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This is my home. Not anymore, Richard said. He slammed the door in my face. I slept in my truck that night. I parked it down the road, looking up at the castle on the hill. I saw the lights go on in the main hall. I saw shadows moving. They were celebrating. The next day, I went to the bank to check my savings. My account was frozen. Flagged for suspicious activity, the teller told me. Initiated by the executor of the estate. Richard. He was trying to starve me out. He wanted me broken, destitute, so I wouldn't have the resources to fight him. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who raised me. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering every scrap of paper I had. I called every lawyer in town, but they all turned me down. Conflict of interest. Or they were afraid of Richard Vance. Then I received a letter. No return address. Just a time and a location. Tuesday, 9 a.m. County Courthouse. Courtroom 4. Be there. And that brings us back to today. I drove my beat-up Ford F-150 away from the courthouse. The victory felt surreal. Richard was my tenant? I owned the house he slept in? It was almost too good to be true. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was my only friend from high school who stayed in town. She was a lawyer, sharp as a tack, but she worked in criminal defense, not estate law. I had called her the night before the hearing, desperate for advice. She was the one who told me to just show up an object to buy time. Oliver! She practically screamed into the phone. I heard. The courthouse is buzzing. Did Judge Cole really say you're Richard's landlord? He did, I said, a smile finally breaking through my exhaustion. Elias Thorne showed up. The Hawthorne Trust holds everything. Hawthorne? Holy cow. Oliver, that's huge. But listen to me. You need to be careful. Careful? I won, Sarah. You won a battle, Sarah said, her voice turning serious. You embarrassed Richard Vance in public. You took his house and his castle. A man like that doesn't just walk away. He retaliates. Watch your back. I will, I said. I'm going to the castle now. I need to see it. I need to know it's really mine. Okay, call me if you need anything. Seriously, Oliver. Lock your doors. I hung up and turned onto the winding road that led to Stirling Castle. The iron gates were open. I drove up the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires. It was majestic. The stone turrets rose against the gray sky, covered in ivy. It looked like a fortress. My fortress. I parked the truck right in front of the main entrance, next to Richard's Rolls-Royce. It was still there. Of course, they hadn't moved out yet. I walked up the steps and pushed open the heavy oak doors. "Hello," I called out. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the foyer. The grand staircase loomed ahead. "Oliver." I turned. Richard was standing in the doorway of the drawing room. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand. His tie was loosened. He looked disheveled, but his eyes were dangerous. "Richard," I said, "I assume you're packing." He laughed. A low, dry sound. "Packing? No. I'm celebrating." "Celebrating what?" "Celebrating the fact that you are predictable," he said. He took a sip of his drink. "You think a piece of paper changes anything? You think you can run this place?" "The court thinks so," I said. "The court doesn't know what I know," Richard said. "The court doesn't know about the investigation." "What investigation?" Richard smiled. It was a wolf smile. "The one into elder abuse. The one into how you coerced a dying old man to sign over his assets." "That's a lie," I said, stepping forward. "Is it?" Richard pulled a remote control from his pocket and pointed it at the wall-mounted TV above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. It was grainy footage. Security camera footage. I saw a room. My grandfather's bedroom. I saw Arthur lying in bed. And I saw me. But it wasn't me. It was someone who looked like me wearing my clothes. The figure on the screen was shouting, leaning over the bed, shaking the old man. "Sign it, old man. Sign it, or I'll leave you here to rot." My blood ran cold. I had never done that. I had never spoken to him like that. "What is this?" I whispered. "Evidence," Richard said softly. "Baxter is filing an emergency motion right now, based on new evidence of criminal misconduct. The trust has a clause, Oliver, a moral turpitude clause. If the beneficiary is charged with a crime against the grantor, the trust is voided." He took another sip of whiskey. "You have 24 hours to sign over the rights to me voluntarily," Richard said, "or this video goes to the police. And instead of living in a castle, you'll be living in a cell." I stared at the screen. The figure turned. It was my face, my voice, but it was impossible. Sarah's warning echoed in my head. He retaliates. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. I stood frozen in the foyer of Stirling Castle, the flickering light from the TV screen casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. The video played on a loop. Every time the figure on the screen shouted, "Sign it!" it felt like a physical blow. "It's a fake," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I never did that. You know I never did that." Richard Vance swirled the amber liquid in his glass, looking at me with mock pity. "Does it matter, Oliver? Perception is reality. The judge saw a piece of paper today and froze. Imagine what he'll do when he sees a video of the beloved grandson abusing the poor, defenseless Arthur Stirling." "Technology can be checked," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Deepfakes, edits. Experts will see right through it." "Experts take time," Richard countered smoothly, "and money, both of which you don't have. By the time you prove this is a fabrication, if you can, I'll have been the court-appointed guardian of the estate for months, maybe years. And a lot can happen to a castle in a few years. Walls crumble. Assets get liquidated to pay for legal fees." He stepped closer, the smell of expensive scotch and stale cigars wafting off him. "Think about your mother, Oliver. Do you want her to see her son dragged away in handcuffs? Do you want her to go through the shame of a trial? Don't you dare talk about her," I snapped. "You don't care about her. I provide for her," Richard roared, his composure cracking for a split second. "I gave her a life you never could. I saved this family from ruin after your father left." He paused on the word left. It hung in the air, heavy and wrong. My father died, I said. Same result, Richard shrugged. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the antique hallway table. Renunciation of rights. Sign it. You walk away with $50,000 cash. Enough to buy a new truck and start over somewhere far away. You don't sign it? I send the video to the district attorney in 1 hour. He checked his watch. Tick-tock, Oliver. I looked at the document. Then I looked at the video again. The figure on the screen raised a hand as if to strike my grandfather. I felt a wave of nausea. I turned and walked out the door. Running away? Richard called after me. Smart choice. I got into my truck and peeled out of the driveway. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I needed help. I needed someone who understood this game better than I did. I drove straight to Sarah Jenkins' office. It was a small, cluttered space above a bakery in town. The smell of fresh bread usually made me feel better. But today it just made me feel sick. I burst in without knocking. Sarah was on the phone, feet up on her desk. She took one look at my face and hung up. Oliver? What happened? Did he threaten you? Worse, I said. He has a video of me abusing Grandpa. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. What? You? You wouldn't hurt a fly. It's fake, I said, pacing the small room. But it looks real, Sarah. It looks terrifyingly real. My voice, my face. He says he's going to send it to the DA if I don't sign over the castle. Sarah stood up and grabbed her laptop. Okay, slow down. Describe it. I told her everything. The angle, the words, the clothes. Security footage, Sarah muttered. If it's from the castle system, there should be a timestamp. Metadata. Did you see a timestamp? I didn't look closely. I was too busy trying not to punch him. We need to see that video, Sarah said. But we can't ask him for it. He'll just send a copy to the police. What do we do? I sat down, burying my head in my hands. He gave me an hour. I have 40 minutes left. Sarah bit her lip, thinking. Who handles the tech for the Van Cess? Who would have the capability to make a deepfake that good that fast? Julian, I said instantly. He runs Vance Media. He has a whole studio in the city. He's always bragging about his CGI team. Julian, Sarah nodded. Okay, if Julian made it, there's a digital trail. But we can't get a warrant in 40 minutes. Just then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello, Mr. Sterling. It was Elias Thorne. His voice was calm, anchoring me in the storm. Elias? I said, relief flooding through me. Richard. He has a video. I know, Elias said. You know? Your grandfather anticipated this, Elias said. He knew technology could be weaponized. Oliver, listen to me carefully. Do not sign anything. Go back to the castle. But don't go inside yet. Meet me at the gate. But the hour? Richard is bluffing about the hour, Elias said. He wants you to sign because he knows the video won't hold up in a real investigation. But he also knows it will destroy your reputation in the short term. We need to beat him at his own game. How? Come to the gate, Elias said. And bring Ms. Jenkins. We'll need a witness. I looked at Sarah. Let's go. We raced back to the castle. At the heavy iron gates, a black sedan was waiting. Elias Thorne stepped out. He wasn't alone. A younger man, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, was sitting in the passenger seat with a laptop. This is Alex, Elias said. He works for Hawthorne's cybersecurity division. Alex didn't look up from his screen. I'm in the Vance Media server. Their firewall is a joke. It's like a piece of Swiss cheese. You hacked them? Sarah asked, impressed. Let's call it aggressive auditing, Elias said smoothly. Alex, what did you find? Project folder labeled The Old Man, Alex said. Created 3 days ago. Render logs show a deepfake generation using Oliver's voice samples from looks like voicemails, and video samples from a wedding. My cousin's wedding, I realized. I gave a speech. Julian recorded it. Here's the smoking gun, Alex said. They used a bass actor for the body movements. I have the raw footage of the actor. Some guy in a green suit standing in a studio. He turned the laptop around. We watched a man in a green motion capture suit yelling at an empty chair. Sign it, old man. Sign it. Gotcha, Sarah whispered. This is proof, I said. We can stop him. Not just stop him, Elias said, his eyes hardening. We are going to break him, but we have to do it publicly. If we just show him this privately, he'll deny it, destroy the evidence, and try something else. We need to let him play his hand. What do you mean? I asked. Let him file the motion, Elias said. Let him submit the video to the court. Once it's entered into evidence, it's a crime. Perjury. Fabrication of evidence. Then we drop the hammer. But that means I get arrested, I said. That means my name gets dragged through the mud. It's a risk, Elias admitted. But it's the only way to ensure he goes to prison and can never touch you or the estate again. Do you trust me, Oliver? I looked at the castle. I looked at Sarah. She nodded slowly. I trust you, I said. The next morning, the storm broke. Headlines screamed. Heir to sterling fortune accused of elder abuse. Police arrived at my apartment at 8 a.m. They were polite but firm. I was handcuffed, walked past flashing cameras. I saw Julian in the crowd of reporters, looking somber, shaking his head. It's a tragedy, I heard him tell a reporter. We tried to help him. We tried to get him help. I spent the night in a holding cell. It smelled of urine and despair. I sat on the metal cot, replaying the plan in my head. Wait for the hearing. Wait for the hearing. The emergency hearing was set for 2 days later. Baxter had moved fast, claiming I was a danger to the estate and the community. I walked into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. It was humiliating. My mother was there again, crying into a handkerchief. Richard looked solemn like a grieving parent. Judge Cole looked furious. He glared at me. Mr. Sterling, he said, these are heinous accusations. The video evidence submitted by the plaintiff is disturbing. It is heartbreaking, Your Honor, Baxter said. We ask that Mr. Sterling be removed as beneficiary immediately and remanded to custody pending trial. Does the defense have anything to say? Judge Cole asked. Sarah stood up. She was representing me now. Yes, Your Honor, she said clearly. We would like to present a piece of evidence that will clarify the context of the plaintiff's video. Context? Baxter scoffed. You can't contextualize beating an old man. If the court permits, Sarah said, plugging a flash drive into the AV system. The screens in the courtroom flickered. Instead of the grainy bedroom footage, a split screen appeared. On the left, the video Richard had submitted. On the right, the footage Alex had stolen from Vance Media. The man in the green suit appeared. He waved his arms. Sign it, old man. On the left screen, my digital face did the exact same movement. The courtroom gasped. Then Sarah played the audio. Okay, Julian, is that angry enough? The actor in the green suit asked. Yeah, that's good, came Julian's voice from off-camera. Make him look crazier. Make him look like he's about to hit him. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I looked at Julian. He was pale as a sheet. He tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to fail him. I looked at Richard. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at the door, calculating the distance. Judge Cole stood up. He didn't use his gavel. He didn't need to. His voice was a thunderclap. Mr. Baxter, he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Did you know about this? Baxter was sweating profusely. Your Honor, I receive evidence from my clients. I assume good faith. Good faith, Judge Cole roared. This is a fabrication. This is a fraud upon the court. He turned to the bailiffs. Seal the exits, Judge Cole ordered. No one leaves this room. He pointed a finger at Julian. Mr. Julian Vance, you are in contempt. And I am referring this immediately to the district attorney for charges of perjury, evidence tampering, and fraud. Julian started to cry. It wasn't my idea. It was Dad. Dad told me to do it. Shut up, you idiot, Richard hissed, grabbing Julian's arm. And you, Mr. Vance? Judge Cole said, his eyes cold as ice. It seems you have dug your own grave. I demand a lawyer, Richard shouted. This is a setup. Elias Thorne stood up from the gallery. Actually, Your Honor, there is one more thing. Mr. Thorne, Judge Cole asked. The trust has a no-contest clause, Elias said calmly, as we discussed, but it also has a malicious action clause. Any family member who attempts to defraud the estate forfeits all claim to any assets, gifts, or allowances previously granted by Arthur Sterling. He turned to look at Julian. That includes the trust fund set up for Julian's education and business ventures. It is hereby revoked. The $2 million in his accounts? It belongs to the estate now. Julian screamed. It was a high, thin sound. No, my money. You can't take my money. It's already done, Elias said. The transfers were executed the moment the fraud was proven in court. I watched them crumble. The arrogant stepbrother, the domineering stepfather. They were turning on each other, tearing each other apart. But amidst the chaos, I looked at my mother. She hadn't moved. She sat stone still, staring at the table. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. And then, she looked at me, and for the first time I saw a message in her eyes. It wasn't pity. It was a warning. Run. Why would she want me to run? I had one. Just then, Richard's phone buzzed on the table. He looked at it. His face went from angry to something else. Something haunted. He whispered something to my mother. She flinched. Richard stood up, ignoring the judge's order. I need to use the restroom, he said. Sit down, the bailiff shouted, moving toward him, but Richard was fast for a big man. He shoved the bailiff aside and bolted for the side door. Stop him, Judge Cole shouted. Chaos erupted. Bailiffs chased after him. Julian was sobbing on the floor. I looked at Elias. Where is he going? Elias checked his own phone. His face paled. The castle, Elias said. He's going to the castle. Why? I asked. He doesn't own it anymore. Because, Elias said, looking at me with grave intensity. He knows what's in the red room. The red room? I asked. There is no red room. There is, Elias said. And if he gets there before we do, he will burn everything, including the truth about your father. My father. I didn't wait for permission. I ran. I ran out of the courthouse, ignoring the shouts of the bailiffs. Sarah was right behind me, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. Oliver! My car! She yelled, pointing to a sleek Porsche Macung parked at the curb. Your truck won't catch him. We jumped in. Sarah peeled out, running a red light. What is the red room? Sarah asked, gripping the steering wheel. And what does it have to do with your dad? I don't know, I said, checking my phone. Elias had sent a location pin. It was moving fast along the highway toward the castle. Elias said it has the truth. Richard is trying to destroy it. Richard is desperate, Sarah said. He's not just fighting for money anymore. He's fighting for his life. People do crazy things when they're cornered. We hit the highway. Sarah floored it. The Porsche engine roared. We wove through traffic, dodging slower cars. Ahead, I saw the black Rolls-Royce weaving in and out of lanes. There he is. I pointed. Richard was driving like a maniac. He clipped the side of a minivan, sending sparks flying, but he didn't stop. He's insane, Sarah muttered. My phone rang. It was Elias. Oliver, listen to me, Elias said. His voice was strained. I could hear wind noise. He must be in his own car behind us. The red room is behind the East Library. The entrance is concealed behind the tapestry of the Battle of Hastings. I know that tapestry, I said, but there's just a wall behind it. There's a keypad, Elias said, embedded in the stone frame. The code. The code is your birthday. My birthday. Grandpa. What's in there, Elias? I asked. Tell me. Your grandfather spent 20 years investigating the crash, Elias said. The crash that killed your father. He didn't believe it was an accident. He found things. Proof. My stomach dropped. Proof of what? Proof that the brake lines were cut, Elias said. And proof of who paid for it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Richard. It was Richard. He didn't just steal my inheritance. He stole my father. He's going to burn it, I said, my voice cold. Don't let him, Elias said. But be careful. He's dangerous. We took the exit toward the estate. The Rolls-Royce was gaining distance on the winding back roads. Richard knew these turns as well as I did. Can this thing go faster? I asked Sarah. Hold on, she said. She downshifted and the car surged forward. We screeched through the open gates of the castle. The Rolls-Royce was already parked haphazardly on the front lawn, tire tracks tearing up the grass. The driver's door was open. I jumped out before the car fully stopped. Call the police, I yelled to Sarah. Tell them he's armed. I sprinted up the steps. The front door was smashed open. Richard hadn't used a key, he'd kicked it in. I ran into the foyer. It was empty. I heard crashing sounds coming from the east wing. I ran past the grand staircase, my footsteps echoing on the marble. I reached the library doors. They were open. Inside it was chaos. Books were pulled off shelves. Chairs were overturned. And there, by the far wall, was Richard. He had torn the massive tapestry down. It lay in a heap on the floor. He was punching numbers into a keypad set into the stone. Richard, I shouted. He spun around. He was sweating, his eyes wild. He held a silver lighter in one hand and a bottle of lighter fluid in the other. You, he snarled. You just couldn't let it go. Could you? You couldn't just take the money and leave. You killed him, I said, walking slowly toward him. You killed my father. He was weak, Richard shouted. He didn't know how to use this wealth. He was going to donate half the land to the state for a park. I saw the potential. I saw the empire. So you murdered him? I made a business decision, Richard yelled. The keypad beeped green. Click. A section of the stone wall popped open. Richard grabbed the handle and pulled. A dark, narrow staircase was revealed. He sprayed lighter fluid into the dark opening. No! I lunged at him. Richard swung the lighter fluid bottle, hitting me in the head. I stumbled back, seeing stars. He flicked the lighter. Goodbye, Oliver, he said. He threw the lit lighter into the hole. Whoosh! A ball of fire erupted from the stairwell. But then, something happened. A hiss. A loud psshhh. White foam sprayed from nozzles inside the hidden room. The fire was extinguished instantly. Richard stared at the hole, stunned. Halon system, a voice said from the doorway. We both turned. Elias Thorne stood there, holding a gun. Arthur anticipated arson, too, Elias said calmly. The room is oxygen-deprived and equipped with automatic suppression. Richard roared in frustration. He charged at me, pulling a small pistol from his waistband. I hadn't seen it before. If I can't burn the proof, Richard screamed, I'll kill the heir. I didn't have time to think. I tackled him. We hit the floor hard. The gun skittered across the rug. Richard was heavy, strong, fueled by adrenaline. His hands found my throat. He squeezed. I gasped for air, clawing at his face. His eyes were bulging, filled with pure malice. You should have died in that crash too, he spat. I told the mechanic to cut the lines on both sides. You were just a baby. You were supposed to be with him. I kicked him hard in the stomach. He grunted and loosened his grip. I rolled over and punched him. Once, twice. For every year he made me feel worthless. For every lie. For my father. He slumped back, dazed. Police! Drop it! Hands in the air! Uniformed officers swarmed the room. Sarah was behind them, pointing at Richard. They pulled Richard off the floor and cuffed him. He was bleeding from his lip, breathing heavily. He looked at me, The arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. "It's over, Richard," I said, standing up and wiping blood from my forehead. Elias walked over and holstered his weapon. He looked at the open panel in the wall. "Shall we see what he was so afraid of?" Elias asked. I nodded. We walked down the narrow stairs into the red room. It smelled of chemical suppressant, but the filing cabinets lining the walls were intact. In the center of the room was a desk. On it, a single red folder. I opened it. Photos. Grainy, black and white photos from 20 years ago. A man under a car. Richard handing an envelope of cash to the man. Bank statements. And a journal. My grandfather's journal. Entry. June 4th, 1998. Frank Duca confessed. He says Richard paid him $50,000. I have it on tape. But I cannot go to the police yet. Richard has threatened Evelyn. He says if I talk, he will kill Oliver. I must wait. I must protect the boy. I read the words through tears. My grandfather hadn't ignored Richard's crimes. He had been held hostage by them. He had endured Richard's presence in his home for 20 years just to keep me alive. "Where is the tape?" I asked Elias. "Safe," Elias said. "And Frank Duca? Who is Frank Duca?" "The mechanic," Elias said. "The man Richard hired. Richard thinks he's dead. But Arthur paid him more. He paid him to disappear. To stay alive." "Is he?" "He's here," Elias said. "In the guest house. I brought him in last night." I closed the folder. I had everything. The motive. The method. The witness. I walked back upstairs. The police were leading Richard out. He saw the red folder in my hand and slumped, his fight finally gone. Outside, the flashing lights illuminated the castle walls. My mother was standing by the police car, watching Richard get shoved into the back seat. She looked at me. She took a step forward. "Oliver," she whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't know he killed him." I looked at her. I wanted to believe her. I really did. "But you knew he was dangerous," I said. "And you let him stay. You let him raise me." She started to cry. "I was scared." "So was I," I said. "But I didn't sell my soul." I turned away from her and walked toward Sarah and Elias. The nightmare was over. But as I looked up at the stars above Stirling Castle, I knew the healing would take much longer. The trial of Richard Vance for the murder of my father, Daniel Stirling, became the biggest news story in the state. They called it the Castle Murder. Every day the courtroom was packed. This time I wasn't the defendant. I sat in the front row, right behind the prosecutor, Catherine Walsh. Walsh was a legend. She had eyes that could drill through steel and a voice that commanded absolute silence. She didn't need theatrics. She had the truth. Richard sat at the defense table. He looked smaller now. The expensive suits were replaced by prison gray. The arrogant sneer was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. Baxter had abandoned him. No lawyer wants to be associated with a client who tries to burn them alive. So he was represented by a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The evidence was overwhelming. First came the documents from the Red Room. Walsh projected them onto the big screen. The bank transfers. The withdrawal of $50,000 in cash 2 days before the accident. The photos of Richard meeting with a shady figure in an alleyway. Then came the video from the hidden room itself. Not the deepfake, but the footage of Richard trying to burn the evidence, screaming that he had killed my father because he was in the way. The jury watched in stunned silence as Richard's own voice condemned him. But the final nail in the coffin was Frank Duca. When the bailiff called, "The prosecution calls Frank Duca," a murmur went through the crowd. Everyone thought the mechanic had died of an overdose 10 years ago. That was the story Richard had spread. Frank walked in. He was old now, walking with a cane, his hands shaking. He looked like a man who had spent 20 years looking over his shoulder. He took the stand and swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Duca," Walsh asked gently, "do you recognize the defendant?" Frank looked at Richard. His eyes filled with tears. "Yes, that's the man who paid me to cut the brake lines on Mr. Stirling's car." "Tell us what happened," Walsh said. I was in debt, Frank said, his voice cracking. Gambling. Bad people were after me. Mr. Vance. He found out. He offered to pay it all off. Plus 50 grand. He said it needed to look like an accident. And did you do it? God help me, I did. Frank wept. I cut the fluid line. Just enough so it would fail when he hit the brakes hard. Like on a curve. And after I heard the news, he died. And the baby, Oliver, he wasn't in the car. Thank God. Mr. Vance was furious. He told me to leave town or I'd be next. Why did you come back? Because Arthur Sterling found me, Frank said. He found me a week later. I thought he was going to kill me, but he didn't. He gave me a choice. Go to the police and maybe get killed by Vance's connections or disappear. Let him protect me until the time was right. He looked directly at me. I've been waiting 20 years to say I'm sorry, Oliver. I nodded at him. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't forgive him, he killed my father. But I understood him. He was just another pawn in Richard's game. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Richard didn't react. He just stared at the table. But as they led him away, he stopped. He looked at me one last time. You think you won? He rasped. You're just like your grandfather, a keeper of ghosts. You'll die alone in that big, cold house. Maybe, I said, but I'll die with a clean conscience. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The aftermath was swift. The Vance empire collapsed overnight. The IRS swooped in, freezing assets. Creditors came knocking. Julian, stripped of his trust fund and facing charges for the deepfake video, took a plea deal. He got 3 years probation and community service. He lost his company, his Lamborghini, his penthouse. I saw him once, working at a car wash on the edge of town. He saw me drive by in my truck. He didn't wave. He just looked down and kept scrubbing. My mother, that was the hardest part. She wasn't charged. There was no proof she knew about the murder. But the court of public opinion had convicted her. She was the woman who slept next to a murderer for 20 years. The socialite friends disappeared. The club memberships were revoked. She moved into a small condo in Florida. She calls me sometimes. The conversations are short, awkward. We talk about the weather. We don't talk about the past. But there was one final secret. One last twist that the Red Room held. A week after the trial, I was back in the castle. I was cleaning out the Red Room, moving the files to a secure archive. I was feeling lighter, but also empty. The fight was over. What now? I was moving the heavy desk when I noticed a loose floorboard underneath. I pried it open. Inside was a small velvet box. And a letter. The letter was in handwriting I didn't recognize. Elegant, looping script. To my son, Oliver. My heart stopped. It was from my father. Daniel, if you are reading this, then Arthur has kept his promise. He told me he would give this to you when you were old enough. I am writing this because I am afraid. Richard Vance has been making threats. He wants the company. He wants the land. I have refused him, but I see the way he looks at me. I see the way he looks at your mother. I have taken out a life insurance policy. A big one. But not the one Richard knows about. I have set up a separate fund, hidden in an offshore account. It is for you, Oliver. For your education. For your future. But more importantly, inside this box is something that belongs to you. I opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring. A simple gold signet ring with the sterling crest. And a microcassette tape. I found an old player in the library and put the tape in. Click. Hiss. Daniel, a voice said. It was Richard. Younger, smoother. Don't be stupid. Sell me the shares. Or accidents happen. Are you threatening me, Richard? My father's voice. Strong. Defiant. I'm promising you, Richard said. No one stands in the way of progress. Not even family. My father had recorded him. He knew. He knew he was going to die and he tried to leave a trail. But Richard had been too fast. I sat there, listening to my father's voice for the first time in my life. I didn't hear a victim. I heard a hero, a man who stood his ground. Wait, I realized I might have told you things out of order in my rush to explain the trial. Let me take you back to that day. The day of the fire. The day of the chase. Because that wasn't just a drive. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. We were in Sarah's Porsche. The engine was screaming as we pushed 100 miles per hour. The world outside was a blur of green trees and gray asphalt. "He's going to kill us if he sees us," Sarah said, her knuckles white on the wheel. "He won't see us," I said, though I wasn't sure. "He's too focused on the castle." We saw smoke before we saw the gates. Black, thick smoke rising into the sky. "Oh God," I whispered. "He beat us." "Maybe it's not the room," Sarah said. "Maybe it's just—" We didn't finish the sentence. "Just what? The whole castle?" We skidded through the gates. The smoke was coming from the east wing. But it wasn't a roaring inferno yet. It was the smoldering start of something terrible. Richard's car was there, door open. I jumped out. The heat hit me. The smell of burning tapestry and chemicals. I ran inside. That's when I found him in the library. The moment I described earlier, the confrontation, the gun, the fight. But there was a detail I missed. A detail that haunts me. When Richard had the gun pointed at me before the police burst in. He smiled. "You know," he said, breathless, blood on his teeth. "Your mother knew." I froze. "What?" "She knew I hated your father," Richard said. "She knew I wanted him gone. She didn't know about the breaks, maybe, but she knew I was glad he was dead. And she married me anyway, because she liked the diamonds more than she liked the truth." "Liar!" I screamed. "Ask her," Richard laughed. "Ask her about the night of the accident. Ask her why she didn't cry. That's when I tackled him. That's when the rage took over. Later, after the police took him away, after the fire department cleared the smoke, I stood in the ruined library. Elias was there, supervising the removal of the files. "Did you hear what he said?" I asked Elias. "About my mother?" Elias sighed. He looked old suddenly. Tired. "Oliver," he said, "your grandfather loved your mother, but he knew she was weak. She chose comfort over courage. That is a sin, perhaps, but it is not murder." "It feels like it," I said. I walked out to the guest house. I needed to see Frank Duca again, the man who actually cut the lines. He was sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette. He looked at me with sad, watery eyes. "Did she know?" I asked him. "My mother." Frank took a long drag. "She called me," he said quietly. "What?" "The night before the crash. She called the garage. She asked if the car was ready, if the work was done." I felt the ground sway beneath me. "She thought—" Frank hesitated. "She thought I was just fixing the transmission. Richard told her it was a surprise gift. A tune-up. She didn't know it was sabotage. But she knew Richard was up to something. And she didn't ask questions." Willful ignorance. It was almost worse than guilt. I went back to the main house. The police were gone. The silence was back. But now it wasn't empty. It was heavy with the ghosts of 20 years of lies. I walked into the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee. I sat at the table where I used to eat breakfast as a kid, before I was banished. I looked at the empty chair where my father used to sit. "I got him, Dad," I whispered. "I got him." But the victory felt hollow, because I had lost the last illusion I had. The illusion that my mother was a victim. She was an accomplice to her own comfort. That night, I slept in my old room in the main wing. I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of brakes screeching and fire. But when I woke up, the sun was shining. The castle was still standing. And it was mine. The silence that fell over Stirling Castle after the police lights faded was heavy. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a library. It was the suffocating silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. The war was over, but now I had to walk among the wreckage and see exactly what had been destroyed. For the first few days I didn't leave the estate. Couldn't. The media vans were camped outside the main gates like vultures waiting for a carcass. I watched them on the security monitors, cameras pointed at the stone walls, hungry for a glimpse of the heir who took down the tycoon. They wanted a soundbite. They wanted the scandalous details of the divorce that was already making headlines. Yes, divorce. My mother, Evelyn, didn't waste a second. Less than 24 hours after Richard was dragged away in handcuffs, her lawyer filed the papers. She cited irreconcilable differences and fraud. It was a tactical move, of course. She was trying to separate her assets from Richard's before the government seized everything. She was trying to salvage whatever social standing she had left. But I wasn't focused on her yet. I was focused on the Red Room. Elias Thorne stayed with me. We spent 3 days down there, cataloging 20 years of Richard Vance's sins. The room was a tomb of evidence, cold and smelling faintly of the halon gas that had saved it. I opened a filing cabinet labeled Finances, 1998 to 2005. This was the period right after my father died. The documents inside made my stomach turn. I found records of the life insurance payout, $3 million. It was supposed to be my inheritance. It was supposed to be a safety net for my mother and me. Instead, Richard had funneled it into a shell company called Vance Holdings. He had used my father's blood money to build his own empire. I found receipts for cars, Ferraris, Porsches, the Rolls-Royce he loved so much. I found invoices for the renovations that stripped the castle of its original charm and turned it into a showroom for his ego. He had spent thousands on imported marble while refusing to fix the roof of the guest house where he forced me to live. But the most damning thing I found wasn't about money. It was about custody. There was a legal file from when I was 10 years old. My father's sister, my Aunt Sarah, not to be confused with my lawyer friend, had petitioned for custody of me. She suspected Richard was abusive. She wanted to take me away. I never knew about this. I never knew anyone tried to save me. I read the court transcripts. Richard had hired the most expensive lawyers in the state. They painted my aunt as unstable, an alcoholic. They destroyed her reputation in court. Richard testified that he loved me like his own son. My mother testified that I was happy. The judge denied the petition. My aunt moved away a year later, broken. I always thought she abandoned me. Now I knew she had been crushed by the Vance machine. He isolated us. I whispered to Elias, holding the file. He cut off anyone who could have helped. That is what predators do, Oliver, Elias said gently. They create a desert so they are the only source of water. On the 4th day, I finally left the castle. I had to face the one person I had been avoiding, my mother. She was staying at a boutique hotel in the city, hiding from the press. I drove my truck, the engine humming a familiar tune, grounding me in reality. When I knocked on her door, she opened it immediately. She looked smaller than I remembered. The perfect hair was slightly messy. She wasn't wearing makeup. For the first time in years, she looked her age. Oliver, she breathed, reaching out to hug me. I stepped back. Couldn't let her touch me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We need to talk, I said. She let me in. The room was filled with suitcases. She was packing. I'm going to Europe, she said nervously, wringing her hands. Just until this blows over. The press. They're being so cruel. They're calling me an accomplice, Oliver. Can you believe that? Can't I? I asked. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her. Frank Duca told me you called the garage the night before the accident. You asked if the work was done. Her face went pale. She sat down in the armchair, looking like she might faint. I didn't know it was murder, she whispered. I swear on your father's grave, Oliver. Richard told me he was fixing the car up to sell it. He said he needed to tamper with the odometer or something. Something illegal, yes, but not murder. I looked the other way. You looked the other way for 20 years, I said. You looked the other way when he kicked me out. You looked the other way when he forged the will. You looked the other way when he tried to erase Dad. I was afraid, she cried. You don't know what he was like, Oliver. He threatened me. He said if I ever left him, he'd make sure I ended up on the street. He said he'd ruin you. I stayed to protect your future. I wanted you to have a college fund, a trust, a life. I didn't need a trust fund, Mom, I said, my voice cracking. I needed you. She sobbed into her hands. It was a pathetic sound. Part of me wanted to comfort her. She was my mother, after all. But the other part of me, the part that had slept in a truck and eaten ramen while she dined on caviar, was cold as stone. You traded Dad for a Rolls-Royce, I said, and you traded me for a quiet life. I hope it was worth it. I stood up to leave. Oliver, please, she begged. I have nothing. The accounts are frozen. Richard put everything in his name. I'm going to be destitute. I stopped at the door. I pulled a checkbook from my pocket. I had written a check earlier that morning, just in case. I placed it on the dresser. It was for $50,000. The exact amount Richard had paid the mechanic to kill my father. Here, I said. This is from Dad. It's the price of a life. Make it last. I walked out. I didn't look back. The final piece of the puzzle was Julian. I hadn't heard from him since the arrest. But a week later, I was overseeing the removal of Richard's cars from the estate. The IRS had arrived with flatbed trucks. I watched as they winched the lime green Lamborghini onto the truck. It looked ridiculous now, a toy for a child who never grew up. Next came the Ferrari, then the Porsche. Symbols of power being dragged away like scrap metal. A beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the driveway. Julian stepped out. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in days. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking like the college student he should have been instead of a wannabe tycoon. He walked up to me, hands in his pockets. He looked at the Lamborghini being towed away. Nice truck, he said, nodding at the tow truck. It's doing its job, I said. Look, Oliver, Julian started, kicking at the gravel. I didn't know about the murder. Dad never told me that part. I knew he was shady. I knew he hated you. But murder? I'm not a killer. You made the video, Julian, I said. You tried to send me to prison for elder abuse. That's not murder, but it's pretty close to killing a man's life. I know, he said. His voice broke. I was scared of him too. You don't know what it's like. Being the favorite. He controlled every breath I took. If I didn't do what he said, he'd cut me off. He'd humiliate me. We all make choices, I said. I have nothing, Oliver, Julian said. The company is gone. My accounts are seized. I can't even pay rent. I was hoping, since we're brothers. Stepbrothers, I corrected. He flinched. Right, stepbrothers. But we grew up together. I was hoping you could help me out. Just a loan. Until I get back on my feet. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear I had lived with for years. I won't give you money, Julian, I said. Money is what ruined this family. Richard thought money could buy loyalty and silence. I won't make that mistake. Julian's shoulders slumped. He turned to go. But, I said, I have a friend in the city. He runs a construction crew. Hard work. Hourly wage. No salary, no bonus, no corner office. But it's honest. If you want a job, I can make a call. Julian looked at me surprised. Construction? Manual labor. It builds character, I said. Something Richard never bought for you. Julian looked at the castle, then at his hands. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll take it. And Julian? I added. If you ever try to contact my mother, or come near this property again without an invitation, the deal is off. He nodded. He got back into his Civic and drove away. I watched the last of Richard's supercars disappear down the driveway. The driveway was empty now. The noise was gone. It was just me and the castle. And for the first time, the castle didn't feel like a fortress protecting secrets. Felt like a blank canvas. 6 months later, the seasons had changed. The gray skies of winter had given way to the vibrant green of spring. The ivy on the castle walls was lush, and the gardens were blooming with tulips and daffodils. Stirling Castle had changed too. I walked through the main hall. The dark, oppressive oil paintings of Richard's ancestors, which he had bought at auctions to fake a lineage, were gone. In their place were photos of the castle's history, my grandfather Arthur, my father Daniel, and the original blueprints of the estate. The sound of the house had changed. It wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with noise. Good noise. Laughter. Footsteps running down the hall. The sound of a piano being played badly but enthusiastically. I had renamed the estate Pembroke House, after my grandmother's maiden name. It was no longer a private residence for a lonely heir. It was a sanctuary. After the trial, I realized I didn't want to live here alone. I didn't want to be the king of the castle like Richard did. So, I worked with Sarah and Elias to set up a foundation. We turned the East Wing into a temporary shelter for families escaping domestic abuse. We turned the West Wing into a scholarship center for kids who, like me, had been written off by the system. I walked into the library, the former scene of the fire. The scorch marks on the stone floor had been scrubbed away, but I left a few faint traces near the fireplace. A reminder. I sat at my grandfather's desk. It was piled high with applications. Not legal motions or eviction notices, but applications for college funds, for housing assistance, for a second chance. I picked up a pen to sign a grant approval. That's when I saw it. A loose stone in the fireplace hearth. I had been staring at this fireplace for months, but the afternoon light hit it just right, revealing a tiny gap I had missed. My heart beat a little faster. Another secret? Hadn't we found them all? I knelt down and pried the stone loose. Came away easily. Behind it was a small tin box. Not a safe, just a simple biscuit tin. I opened it. Inside wasn't money or incriminating photos. It was a stack of letters. And a photo. The photo was of my mother and father holding me as a baby. They were laughing. Richard wasn't in the picture. It was pure joy. The letters were in my mother's handwriting. But they weren't addressed to me. They were addressed to the police. I unfolded the first one. It was dated 2002, 4 years after my father died. To whom it may concern, my name is Evelyn Vance. I am writing this because I am afraid for my life and the life of my son, Oliver. My husband, Richard Vance, has confessed to me that he tampered with my late husband's car. He says if I try to leave, he will do the same to Oliver. I am trapped. I have no access to money. He monitors my calls. I am hiding this letter in case something happens to me. Please save my son. There were a dozen letters like it, unsent. I sat on the floor, the papers trembling in my hands. She hadn't just been weak. She had been a prisoner. She had tried to speak out, at least on paper. She had hidden these here, in the one place Richard never looked. Grandpa's library, hoping someone would find them if she disappeared. Why didn't she give them to Grandpa? Maybe she couldn't get to him. Maybe Richard watched her too closely. I realized then that the villainy of Richard Vance wasn't just in the big crimes, the murder, the theft. It was in the daily terror he inflicted. He had broken her spirit so completely that even her attempts to fight back were silenced before they could begin. It didn't erase her failure to protect me, but it made her human. It made her a tragedy, not just a traitor. I took the letters and the photo. I would keep them. Maybe one day, when enough time had passed, I would show them to her. Maybe it would help us heal. I walked out to the garden. A group of kids were playing soccer on the lawn where the Rolls-Royce used to park. One of them, a scrawny boy about 10 years old, kicked the ball toward me. I stopped it with my foot. "Nice kick," I said. "Sorry, Mr. Oliver," he shouted. "It's just Oliver," I said, kicking the ball back. Sarah walked up to me holding 2 cups of coffee. She looked tired but happy. We had spent the last 6 months fighting red tape to get the foundation running. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, handing me a cup. "Maybe I did," I said, touching the pocket where the letters were. "But I think the ghosts are finally resting." "We got the approval for the new art studio," Sarah said. "And the promotion materials for the fundraising gala are ready." "Good," I said. "Grandpa would have loved this. He always said a castle is useless unless it protects people." He protected you, Sarah said. He did, I said. And now we protect them. I looked up at the main tower. The flag of the Sterling family was flying again, snapping in the wind. It wasn't a symbol of wealth anymore. It was a symbol of resilience. Richard Vance was in a cell, staring at concrete walls. Julian was scraping cement, learning the value of $1. My mother was in Europe, trying to find herself in the quiet. And I was here, standing on my own grass, surrounded by people who needed this place as much as I did. I wasn't just the heir to a fortune. I was the architect of a new legacy. And this time, the foundation wasn't built on lies. It was built on truth. This story isn't just about a stolen inheritance or a dramatic court case. It's about the insidious nature of greed and how it can dismantle a family from the inside out. Richard Vance thought that power came from ownership, from having the deed, the title, the expensive cars. He believed he could erase the truth with money and intimidation. But the real lesson here is about the power of documentation and patience. My grandfather, Arthur, taught me that you don't fight a bully by shouting louder than them. You fight them with facts, with preparation, and with the unwavering belief that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds the light. It also teaches us about the complexity of victimhood. My mother's silence was frustrating, even damaging, but it was born out of fear. It reminds us that we never truly know the battles people are fighting behind closed doors. However, the most important takeaway is that your legacy is what you build, not what you are given. I could have taken the castle and turned into another Richard, hoarding wealth. Instead, I chose to break the cycle. True power isn't about what you keep for yourself. It's about what you can do for others. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who held all the power? Or have you ever found out a family secret that changed everything? If you enjoyed this journey and believe that truth is worth fighting for, please comment good below. Tells me that stories like this matter to you. Thank you for listening, and remember, the truth is the only thing that cannot be burned.